Hello and welcome to the exam prep session for AB-730 AI Business Professional. The AI Business Professional exam is designed for business professionals who already have experience using generative AI tools, including Microsoft 365 Copilot. You are expected to be comfortable navigating the Microsoft 365 apps such as Outlook, Word, Teams, PowerPoint, and Excel, but you're not expected to build AI solutions or write code. Instead, the exam focuses on how you use AI to improve productivity, support decision-making, and drive business outcomes. This exam preps video or session is not a replacement for official training or practice. You're going to use it to validate your understanding, identify gaps, and confirm that you're ready to sit for the exam. Hello, I'm Andrew Conniff, a Microsoft technical trainer focusing on Copilot and AI strategy adoption. After completing the AB-730 AI Business Professional Training, you should clearly understand how generative AI works in a business context, how Microsoft approaches responsible AI, and how Microsoft 365 Copilot uses generative AI to support everyday work. Remember, this session is about exam readiness. It's not about learning every feature in depth, but about knowing what Microsoft expects you to identify when you see the question on the exam. The exam is structured across 3 objective domains, each with specific weighting that reflects how much of the exam focuses on that area. Understanding generative AI and fundamentals accounts for 25 to 30%, managing prompts and conversations carries the highest weight at 35 to 40%, and drafting and analyzing business content represents 25 to 35%. So these weightings help us prepare on where to focus and make sure that you're familiar with all of the domains covered on the exam. For the exam, Objective 1 is about recognition, not definitions. Microsoft expects you to recognize how generative AI shows up inside M365 and how it behaves in real business scenarios. This is not what is AI objective. Instead, questions here directly relate to everyday work, and you want to choose the interpretation of Copilot behavior, data usage, and risk. This objective is heavily scenario-based. You will often be given a prompt, a user goal, and a business context, and then asked what Copilot can or cannot do, what risk is present, what questions feel conceptual, but what is wrapped inside of a workplace story. It almost always maps back to this objective. For the exam, Microsoft is not testing model architecture or training mechanics. You should be able to recognize AI outcomes, limitations, and guardrails as they appear to the business users. If you see questions that reference trust, reliability, safety, or why Copilot responded a certain way, this objective should immediately come to mind. Here we see the skills measured for the first objective, including understanding how generative AI works across Microsoft 365 experiences and identifying responsible AI and data protection practices. It highlights the types of concepts and tasks that might be assessed during the exam, including key areas you need to be familiar with as part of your preparation. So let's take a look at each of them up close. During examination, responsible AI is tested directly and indirectly. Microsoft expects you to recognize risks such as hallucinations, bias, overconfidence in AI output, and misuse of sensitive information. The exam does not ask you to fix these risks technically. It asks you to spot risks and choose the right safeguard. If a scenario includes a confident but unverifiable AI response, identify the hallucination risk and the need for a human intervention. This is easy to confuse with compliance or security topics. The key distinction is intent. Responsible AI questions focus on trust and outcomes, not enforcement. When the question asks what the user should do next, the answer is often human review, verification, or clarification, not disabling Copilot or changing tenant settings. If you see phrases like ethical concerns, unexpected output, or misleading results, slow down. These questions are testing judgment, not features. Grounding is one of the most commonly tested concepts in this exam. Microsoft expects you to recognize the difference between Copilot responses grounded in organizational data and those grounded in web data. For the exam, grounding determines trust, accuracy, and data scope. If a question mentions internal documents, emails, meetings, or files that the user already has access to, that is working on grounded data. Copilot respects permissions and does not invent access. If a question mentions trends, public information, or external context, that is web-grounded data. These responses are broader but less specific to the organization. A very common exam trap is assuming Copilot always has access to everything. It does not, and if a user cannot see the file, the Copilot can't use it. So it has generic answers instead of a specific one that's often due to grounding limitations. If the questions ask why Copilot's response was vague, incomplete, or generic, grounding should be one of the first things you evaluate. Microsoft expects you to clearly distinguish between chat experiences and agent experiences. Chat is conversational and reactive. It responds to prompts in the moment and does not represent a reusable business capability. Agents, on the other hand, are purpose-built, reusable, and task-focused. For the exam, the decision point is repeatability. If the scenario describes a one-time question, brainstorming, or exploration, chat is the correct mental mode. If the scenario describes recurring tasks, specialized roles, repeatable workflows, the agent is probably the better answer. Both use natural language, but do not let that mislead you. Microsoft is testing whether you can recognize when AI should scale beyond a single conversation. If a question includes words like automate, standardize, or reuse, pause and consider agents first. For the exam, creating a custom agent is not about steps or tools. Microsoft expects you to recognize when customization adds business value. If a scenario describes unique terminology, specialized knowledge, or team-specific processes, that's a strong signal for a custom agent. If the requirements are generic, pre-built agents are usually sufficient. A common mistake is assuming custom agents are always better. On the exam, efficiency matters. Microsoft favors using existing solutions unless there's a clear reason not to. So if a question asks whether to use an agent, a store agent, or create a new one, ask yourself whether the need is unique, repeatable, and business critical. If the answer is no, customization is probably unnecessary. This objective tests judgment, not creativity. Copilot behaves differently across Word, Outlook, and PowerPoint. The exam questions will often describe a business outcome and ask which app or capability best supports it. So focus on recognizing the types of output from Copilot in relation to where you're accessing it. For example, you can add paragraphs to an existing Word document in Word, but not from Microsoft Copilot Chat. For the exam, look for scenarios where safeguards like grounding, moderation, and human oversight reduce risk. Here we see the risk areas associated with using AI, including fabrications, prompt injection, and over-reliance, along with considerations for data privacy and human oversight. It outlines the type of risks and safeguards you should be aware of, indicating the areas of focus for understanding responsible and secure use of AI in the context of the exam. Data protection often appears indirectly in exam questions. If Copilot cannot return certain information, the correct answer is usually related to permissions, compliance, or data boundaries, not a system failure. So watch how Copilot responds, focus on how prompts, sources, and follow-up interactions are governed by the data access, including the ability to validate sources and refine outputs through conversation. From an exam perspective, understands that Copilot operates within organizational boundaries and that limited or missing output is often intentional, tied to security, privacy, or access controls, and not functionality issues. That concludes Objective 1. Remember, Microsoft expects recognition and judgment, not memorization. Objective 2 shifts from understanding AI to controlling it. For the exam, this is about how users shape AI outcomes through prompts, conversation management, and agent selection. Microsoft will expect you to recognize how prompt quality affects output quality. Poor results usually mean unclear context, vague goals, or missing constraints, not that Copilot is not working or broken. So this objective is heavily scenario-driven. Questions often describe user who is unhappy with results and then ask what they should change. The correct answers usually involves refining the prompt or managing the context, not switching tools. If a question focuses on consistency, reuse, or scale, think prompt management or agents. If it focuses on clarity and precision, think prompt refinement. This is one of the highest impact objectives for exam success. The objective focuses on how to effectively interact with Copilot through prompts, conversations, and agents. Key areas include creating structured prompts, managing chat history and workflows, and understanding when to use or build agents. From an exam perspective, the emphasis is on selecting the right interaction method and configuration gets the appropriate contextual result in Microsoft 365 Copilot. And here we're going to see a classic exam pattern. Microsoft is going to expect us to recognize the components of an effective prompt without listing them mechanically. If a scenario describes Copilot misunderstanding intent, the issue is usually missing context or unclear goals. If the output is unfocused, expectations were likely not set. If the response lacks specifics, then the source may be missing. For the exam, you're rarely asked to write a prompt. You're asked to diagnose what is wrong with one. A key exam strategy is to identify what information Copilot did not receive. That missing element is often the correct answer. Expect to know how Copilot uses references within prompts to improve context and accuracy. Key elements to recognize include symbols for files and people and how they guide Copilot to the relevant information. From an exam perspective, the emphasis is on identifying the appropriate reference method based on the scenario. Questions may test whether a prompt correctly references a document, meeting, or an individual, and how that impacts the relevance and the quality of the response. Let's talk about how prompts are managed as part of a repeatable workflow in Copilot. Key areas include saving prompts for reuse, sharing prompts across the team for consistency, and scheduling prompts to automate recurring tasks. From an exam perspective, the emphasis is on recognizing when to use each capability based on the scenario. Questions may test how prompts support efficiency at scale, including reuse, collaboration, and automation of work-related tasks using organizational data. And the exam is going to expect us to know about managing chats in Copilot. So key areas include how to locate past conversations using search or history, how to rename chats for better organization, and how to delete chats that are no longer relevant. Also, be familiar with using notebooks to save important conversations, allowing you to organize and build on key information over time. The exam expects awareness of these features and when to use them, not a step-by-step execution. The exam tests efficiency and governance thinking. Microsoft expects you to recognize when to reuse existing agents versus building new ones. Pre-built agents are faster to deploy and easier to govern, and custom agents require justification. So if a question mentions time constraints, limited scope, or standard tasks, consider the fastest implementation. If it mentions specialized workflows or proprietary knowledge, consider a more involved solution. Think of it as business decisions framed through AI. Now let's talk about what to know when creating and managing agents using templates in Copilot. Be familiar with when creating the custom agent if it's needed instead of a pre-built one, and the key configuration elements such as details, instructions, knowledge capabilities, and suggested prompts. You should also recognize how agents are shared and configured for the team use. The exam focuses on understanding these components and scenarios where they apply rather than the exact steps to build an agent. That wraps up Objective 2, which focuses on managing prompts, conversations, and agents in Copilot. For the exam, be familiar with how prompts are created and reused, how conversations are organized and maintained, and when you use or create agents. The key is understanding these capabilities and when to apply them across common scenarios rather than the detailed steps to perform each of these actions. Objective 3 focuses on outcomes. Microsoft expects you to recognize how Copilot accelerates drafting, summarizing, and analyzing content, not how it replaces human judgment. For the exam, Copilot is a starting point. If scenarios describe creating a first draft, summarizing information, or identifying themes, Copilot is appropriate. If it describes final approval or accountability, human involvement remains essential. This objective often appears in realistic business scenarios involving documents, emails, meetings, or presentations. The correct answer is usually the tool that best matches the outcome, not the most powerful feature. Think productivity, not perfection. The exam will measure what we know about drafting business content and managing collaboration using Copilot. For the exam, be familiar with scenarios where Copilot is used to create new documents, generate content from existing files, and summarize key insights. You should also recognize how Copilot supports meetings and collaboration, including how it helps manage discussions, organize content, and maintain context. The focus is on understanding these capabilities and when to apply them rather than the detailed steps. Now let's take a look at what to know about creating business content using Copilot. For the exam, be familiar with different ways Copilot can assist, including generating first drafts, refining content, organizational information into like lists and tables, and improving the formatting. You should also recognize how these capabilities apply across the apps like Word, Outlook, and PowerPoint. And for common business scenarios, the focus on understanding what Copilot can do and when to use it rather than the specific steps to perform each of these actions. And Microsoft will expect you to recognize when Copilot can synthesize information and when it should only summarize existing content. If a question mentions executive summaries, action items, or decision support, Copilot is being used to reduce cognitive load, not to make decisions. It can be misunderstood that Copilot can infer intent beyond the data that's provided. For the exam, Copilot summarizes and surfaces insights, but humans interpret and decide. If a scenario blends internal data with external trends, grounding becomes important again. Recognize that Copilot can responsibly combine. The exam will test what we know about generating summaries and structured content using Copilot. For the exam, be familiar with how Copilot can create introductions, summarize key information, and enhance documents using both work and web data. You should also recognize scenarios where Copilot helps visualize data or refine content for business reporting. The focus is on understanding these capabilities and when to apply them, again, rather than the detailed steps. Copilot helps move content across Microsoft 365 apps. For the exam, be familiar with scenarios where work flows from documents to presentations and then into communication. The key understanding is how Copilot supports the end-to-end workflow rather than how to perform each step. You should be prepared to understand how Copilot is used during meetings to support productivity, including its ability to summarize discussions in real time, suggest action items, answer questions based on meeting content, and generate structured outputs like tables or summaries. Make sure you recognize common prompt patterns used during meetings and how Copilot helps participants stay aligned and informed throughout the session. You should also know how Copilot is enabled in Teams meetings, including the role of meeting options in transcription and recording in unlocking its full functionality. Be familiar with when Copilot can be used during versus after meetings, and understand that it relies on meeting data and transcripts to provide full, accurate, useful outputs. You will need to understand using Copilot pages for collaboration. For the exam, be familiar with how pages allow you to turn AI responses into structured, editable content that can be shared and worked on over time. Recognizing scenarios where pages support teamwork, organization of ideas, ongoing collaboration, the focus is on understanding these capabilities and when to use them rather than how to configure them. You will need to understand how Copilot uses memory and instructions. For the exam, be familiar with how Copilot can retain preferences and context to improve responses, as well as when temporary chat is used to avoid saving any information. You should also recognize on how Copilot search and chat differ in purpose, especially in how they use organizational data securely. The focus is on understanding these concepts and when they apply rather than on how to configure them. And then let's recap Objective 3, which focuses on drafting and analyzing business content using Copilot. For the exam, be familiar with how Copilot supports content creation, document summarization, and collaboration across all of the Microsoft 365 apps. The key understanding for these scenarios is when to apply them in the business workflows, and you won't be asked about specific steps to complete each task. The exam covers generative AI fundamentals, managing prompts, conversations, and drafting business content using Copilot. Focus on understanding these areas, how they connect across common business scenarios. Recognizing when and why to use these capabilities in Microsoft 365 rather than the detailed steps to perform them will be helpful. This concludes the AB-730 exam preparation session. Review the study guide, reflect on the scenarios you've seen, and focus your final preparation on recognizing the right Copilot capability for each business need. Good luck on your exam, and thanks for watching.